Welcome back to Blacklit Memory. Tonight, I'm sharing 8 true stories strange, chilling, and impossible to explain from deep within the Appalachian Mountains. Each one is a warning, a trace left behind by those who wandered too far and never returned. Ever wonder what it means when you find reversed footprints just outside your tent, or if you hear your own voice calling from the woods, only it's not you in this episode? We'll explore a man who finds himself dying beneath a tree, bells that ring from beneath the floorboards at night, a cross carved into bark with your exact birthday, and lanterns that hover just out of reach, always glowing, never fading. If you find comfort in the strange and the sacred, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this with your friends. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever experienced something you couldn't quite explain. Now then, let's begin. It was mid-October fog season in the high ridges when I first heard the crying. My name's Jacob Elkins. I'm 39 and work trail maintenance for the West Virginia Forest Service. It's a quiet job, mostly thankless flag-downed limbs. Test old ranger radios, log erosion around the paths no one visits. Walker's Ridge is one of those. Too steep, too quiet, and carrying too many of the wrong kinds of stories. They sent me up with a week's worth of gear, told me to check the signal repeaters around mile marker 9, said something kept killing the radio feed. I'd made decent time up the lower trail when I heard it. A child's cry, faint and strange, carried on wind that didn't feel like wind. It was thin, like it passed through something hollow before it reached me. I stopped walking, heart still, letting the silence confirm what I already didn't want to believe. Then it came again closer, but still wordless, just a wail. I tried my radio, and it spat nothing but static, like shallow breath through a throat too small. I shouldn't have followed it. I know that now. But I stepped off the trail toward the sound, and the ground immediately turned soft beneath my boots. The map didn't show any water nearby, but my boots were soaked by the time I reached the old tree line. Mud clung thick as meat, and then I saw him, or something that looked like a him. Small figure, human height, but too still, just standing between the trees. Far enough I couldn't see a face. The crying had stopped. I called out, asked if he was hurt or lost. He didn't answer, just turned and walked deeper into the woods. I hesitated for too long, then followed, breaking every rule we're taught. But by the time I reached the spot where he'd been, there was nothing. No boy, no prints, only wet moss where the ground should have been dry. That night, I camped cold, couldn't keep the fire going for long, and I flinched at every crackle like it was a footstep. Sleep came in fragments. The next morning, I found my boots damp again, drenched. Really, though, I hadn't stepped off trail since the day before. As I moved uphill toward the damaged switchback, I spotted something out of place. Nestled under the roots of a pine was a toy car. Red, rusted, one wheel gone. The paint flaked off when I picked it up, and the crying started again, this time directly behind me. I turned fast. Nothing. No boy, no breath, just me and that toy. Suddenly heavy in my hand, like it had soaked up the sound. I dropped it and kept walking. The fog rolled in thick that evening, heavy enough to hide the nearest trees. And still, the crying didn't stop. It echoed in a way sound shouldn't know direction, no distance, just presence. Louder than before, but never moving. I checked the map again and again. That part of the ridge was empty. No creek, no ruins, nothing marked. I flicked on the radio and nearly dropped it. Through the static came my name just once. Jacob? Then more static. Then another whisper. He's cold. It was a child's voice. Small. Wet somehow, like it came through cloth or earth. I dropped the radio and stumbled back toward my tent. That's when I saw the footprints. Barefoot, small, leading from the dark to the edge of my tent, and back again. But they were reversed. The toes pointed away, like something had walked backward from where I slept. I zipped the tent tight that night, wrapped my gear in my pack, and lay awake holding my lighter like a weapon. Still, I dreamt of fog and crying and something pulling at the zipper from outside. By the fourth day, I wanted out. I packed early, planning to head down before noon. But the trail behind me had changed. Fresh deadfall blocked the path trees I never heard fall, rotted like they'd been lying there for years. I climbed over and tried cutting around, but ended up circling back to my own boot tracks. Something in the trees moved with me, not clearly, just the suggestion of shapes shifting behind fog. Twice, I saw small hands pull out of sight around tree trunks. The crying stayed constant now, bleeding into everything. Even the birds had stopped calling. I found a tree marked with a wooden cross nailed in. It wasn't new. The wood had grayed, and the twine binding it was almost moss-covered. Below it, someone had carved letters into the bark, S.B., 1993. The air went still. Dead. Still no breeze. No branches moving. Not even the sound of my own breath. Then, from somewhere below the ground, or inside my skull, the crying came again, louder, angrier. I backed away from the tree, looked down. My boots were soaked again. Not mud this time. Water. That final night, I gave in. I packed to leave before the sun rose. Told myself if I ran hard enough, I could reach the access road. I tried to sleep one last time. I zipped the tent, placed my lighter in my coat pocket. But I woke cold. The zipper half open, the lighter missing. I stepped out and found it sitting neatly next to a new pair of reversed footprints. Then, from the trees, a whisper, "Stay." In the morning, I didn't stop running until I hit gravel. The ranger station was empty at first, when someone finally showed. I could barely speak. I showed them a photo I'd taken of the cross. The ranger went pale and told me the name carved there. Sam Burrell belonged to a boy who went missing in 1993. His father swore he heard him crying in the ridge for weeks afterward. Search teams never found him, just his toy car. I asked the ranger why the trail was still open. He looked out the window for a long time, then said quietly, "Some trails don't want to forget." I didn't go back to Walker's Ridge, not officially. The Forest Service reassigned me to lowland paths closer to Charleston, and I kept my mouth shut about the crying. But I couldn't leave it behind, not really. I'd hear that sound again sometimes, right on the edge of sleep. That long, low wail, like the boy was under the floorboards of my dreams. I started noticing things, 2 wet boot prints on my porch when it hadn't rained. Static on the radio, even when it was off. I told myself it was stress, trauma, a leftover imprint from too many nights alone in the fog. 6 weeks after that trip, I got a letter. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, black and white, grainy. It showed a tree on Walker's Ridge, the one with the cross. But the cross was gone. And in its place was a child's drawing. Crude, stick figure with no face. The same letters were carved beneath it, S.B., 1993. I burned the photo, threw the ashes in the river. But that night, something knocked once on my door, not loud, just enough to wake me. When I checked, there was nothing. Just a wet footprint on the welcome mat. Barefoot, small. By early December, I couldn't take it. I took leave and drove west, thinking maybe distance would weaken whatever had followed me. Colorado, Utah, I stayed moving, slept in trucks, avoided the woods. But still, the sound found me. In dreams, in parking lot radios. Once, in a motel outside Flagstaff. I woke up to the TV playing static and the screen flashing my name. I yanked the cord from the wall, but the image lingered a moment longer than it should have. It's not just the ridge anymore. It's me. It's with me. I contacted the Burrell family, found them through an old land deed in a public records office. The father was long gone, passed in 2002. But the mother was still living in Beckley, in a small care home. I didn't know what I hoped to find. Maybe closure, maybe a map out of this. She was nearly 90 and sharp as a blade. When I mentioned the ridge, she went still. I told her I'd heard the crying, that I'd seen the cross. She just nodded. He wasn't lost, she said. They called him. I asked who. Her hands trembled. The ones who live under. I didn't ask more. Didn't want to. But she pressed a folded paper into my hand. It was part of a trail map, hand-drawn, old, on it. Someone had marked a spot past mile marker 9, deep into a hollow I'd never seen, in red ink. One word, give back. I almost threw it away. But a part of me knew I couldn't keep ignoring this. Not after the dream I had the night after. The boy stood in my kitchen, crying, water pooling at his feet. He looked up once. No eyes, just fog. So I went back. Not officially. I parked 3 miles south of the ranger gate and hiked in off-trail. No pack, no radio, just the map. The toy car I'd picked up before, and a bell I'd found in an old supply box, etched with runes I couldn't read. I followed the map's markings, deeper than I'd ever gone. The ridge seemed different now, less like a place and more like a mouth. And every step felt like walking into something that had been waiting. Near dusk, I reached the hollow. Trees twisted unnaturally. Some bent toward each other like they were whispering. In the center was a pool, not water, but fog thick enough to hide the bottom. The air was freezing. Dead still. I pulled out the toy car and placed it on the ground. The crying stopped. For the first time in months, everything went silent. Then the fog shifted and something rose from the hollow. A figure. Small. Barefoot. It didn't look at me. Just walked to the toy, picked it up, and slowly faded back into the mist. I rang the bell once. The sound cracked the silence like a bone breaking. And then, nothing. I left without looking back. Reached the car by dawn. My boots were dry. The sky was clear. The ridge didn't follow this time. Since then, the crying hasn't returned. No more footprints. No whispers. Just quiet. But sometimes, when the fog rolls low and the trees creak with old weight, I think about that word, give back, and I wonder what happens when there's nothing left to return. I didn't set out to find anything strange. I was training for a trail marathon, just me, a hydration pack, and an old route winding through Boone Hollow, Tennessee. The locals called it bad ground, but I took that for rural superstition. I was 31 then, still running on adrenaline and skepticism, convinced that solitude was therapy. My name's Ben Carpenter, and I'd just come through a divorce that gutted my life. Boone Hollow offered the kind of silence you can't buy. No reception, no trail cameras, just leaves underfoot and switchbacks worn thin from old mule roots. The first sign that something wasn't right came when I lost my earbuds. I remember shoving them into the zip pocket on my chest strap. But when I reached for them a mile later, the pocket was open and empty. I doubled back a short distance, eyes low to the ground. And that's when I saw a man sitting against a tree just off the trail. He didn't move, didn't react when I called out. Just sat there, breathing shallow, one hand resting on his knee. I approached slowly, thinking maybe he was hurt. But when I got closer, I stopped cold. It was me. Same face, same lean runner's build, same gray compression shirt with the salt-ringed collar. His hydration pack was mine, even down to the frayed drawstring on the left shoulder. He looked up, eyes bloodshot. He smiled just a little slow and sad, like he already knew something I didn't. I backed away fast, tripped over a root, and scrambled to my feet. He didn't follow, just watched me. When I reached the trail again, the forest had gone quiet. The birds, the insects, even the breeze all gone, like the woods were holding their breath. I ran, not a sprint, but a long-distance survival pace, focused on keeping rhythm, on putting distance between me and whatever that was. But every turn in the trail started to feel familiar in a wrong way, like I'd already passed that split oak, that boulder with the moss scar. I checked my GPS watch. The screen showed me circling the same quarter-mile loop. Again and again. I stopped, took a breath, switched to compass mode. The needle pointed due east, then twitched, then spun violently, settling impossibly back toward me. I forced myself off the trail, thinking I could cut downhill to the old Ranger Road. I'd studied the topography before the run. The slope was manageable. But after 30 minutes of pushing through saplings and brush, I came out on the same trail I'd left. Same angle, same tree with the old nailed horseshoe. But now, the man was standing in the center of the trail, maybe 30 feet ahead, still smiling, still me. I shouted at him questions, curses, anything to break the tension, but he didn't move. Just tilted his head, like a curious dog. Then he stepped backward into the woods without a sound, vanishing between the trees. I didn't chase him. I turned and ran the other way, legs shaking, throat dry. That's when I noticed something else. My shadow wasn't lining up with the sun. It stretched out sideways, moving just a half-second after I did, like it was a second version of me with a delay. At some point, I passed a trail marker nailed into a tree blazing red, the kind used only for closure notices. But it was split down the center, like something had clawed it. I ran until I couldn't anymore, collapsed beside a stump, and pulled out my phone out of habit. No signal, of course. But the lock screen image had changed, instead of the photo of my dog. It was now a shot of me, standing at the base of a tree, back turned, arms at my sides. I didn't take that picture, and I don't know who did. I opened the photo app. All the images were gone, except that one. And when I tried to delete it, the screen went black. Just a flicker of my face reflected in the glass, only not quite my face. The expression was wrong, almost pitying. I tried to stay put, told myself if I stopped moving, the forest might reset, But dusk came too fast, and the trail didn't cool the way it should. The air stayed thick, like walking through wet cloth. I set up a makeshift camp, ate half an energy bar, tried to sleep sitting upright with my back to the tree. But at some point, I heard movement, footsteps light and measured, like someone jogging in place. I opened my eyes, and there he was. Again, just a few feet away, staring at me. He leaned down slowly, like he didn't want to startle me. Then he whispered something that still rings in my ears when I'm alone. Only one of us gets out. I didn't sleep after that, just sat there stiff with fear, holding my breath every time a branch creaked or a bird fluttered too near. But there weren't any birds anymore. Not really. Boone Hollow had emptied out sometime in the night, as if the trees had grown tired of witnesses. When the light finally filtered through the canopy, it looked wrong, dull and sour, like it had passed through tinted glass before it touched the forest floor. I didn't move until the shadows shifted again. When I finally stood, my legs ached like I'd been running in place all night. I headed uphill, thinking elevation might help orient me. Or maybe I just needed distance between myself and wherever I'd seen him last. But after half an hour, I came across something I didn't expect: a campsite. My campsite. Same log, same flattened patch of leaves, same wrapper from the energy bar I'd eaten. The only difference was the indentation in the dirt beside the log, deep enough to suggest someone else had been sitting there. Two. Someone heavier. I didn't remember anyone joining me. But there were two footprints pressed deep in the soil. One set mine. The other just slightly off, smaller, lighter. As if someone had followed but never stepped fully into place. I pulled out my compass again. It spun, then settled with the needle pointing straight at me. I closed my eyes, swallowed down panic, and kept walking. I started talking out loud my own name, the date, facts I could prove. It helped, somehow, but only for a little while. I heard a voice ahead, my voice, repeating the same things I'd just said, word for word. But half a second after me, I stopped speaking. The echo didn't. The terrain began to change. Not visibly, just in feeling. The slope beneath my feet felt wrong, like it pushed against me no matter which way I turned. Trees leaned at strange angles. Branches above formed patterns too precise to be natural. Like the forest had tried to write something in its canopy and given up halfway through. I came across a fork in the trail I didn't remember. No signs, no markings. I chose the left path, but before I stepped forward, I noticed a strip of cloth snagged on a bramble. My shirt. Same tear I'd patched 2 weeks ago, but I'd been wearing a jacket the whole trip. Something was rewriting the trail as I walked it. I kept going. No better plan. Eventually, I came to a clearing where the trees bowed outward in a perfect circle. In the center stood a figure back turned, unmoving. Same build, same clothes. I thought it was him again. The double. But when I stepped closer, I realized it wasn't just him. It was me, and it was dead. Eyes open, mouth slack, as though frozen mid-breath. There was no blood, no wounds. Just stillness, like he'd stopped existing the moment I arrived. I stepped back, heart pounding. But something in the woods behind me cracked sharp and clean, like a bone breaking underfoot. I turned. The trees were closing in, trunks shifting slightly as if adjusting their positions when I wasn't looking. I didn't run, Not this time. I just turned and faced the body again, sat down beside it. And that's when I understood. It wasn't about getting lost. It wasn't even about the hollow. It was about choice. Boone Hollow didn't trap you. It mirrored you, split you. Watched what you did with the other version of yourself. One of you would always find the trail again. The other would stay behind, caught like a breath between trees. I sat for a long time, thinking about who I was, who I'd been, and what part of me belonged to this place now. Then I stood, looked down at the body, and whispered, "It's yours now." The forest went quiet again. No birds, no wind. But a path opened up ahead, narrow, overgrown, but real. I walked it. Hours passed, maybe days. Time bent around Boone Hollow like water around a stone. But eventually, I saw tire tracks, gravel. I'd made it to the Ranger Road. I didn't call anyone. Didn't report what I'd seen. Who would believe me? I drove home in silence. Every mirror in my car taped over so I wouldn't have to see my own face reflected back. I don't run anymore. I don't go near woods. And sometimes, in the blue hours before dawn, I catch my reflection moving just a little too slow. A little too late, like it's remembering how to be me. The locals told me not to answer the whistle. They said if I heard one, keep walking. If I heard two, run. I thought they were joking at first, just one of those old Appalachian superstitions meant to spook outsiders. But I nodded politely and kept unpacking my gear. My name's June, 26. Freelance wildlife photographer trying to build a name shooting night species in remote environments. Blacktop Creek in Kentucky had the kind of biodiversity I needed, and the kind of darkness that keeps things honest. It started quiet. I spent 2 days cataloging nocturnal birds and setting up trail cams. The woods were heavy, draped in humidity and moss. Every footstep soft and muffled. I kept to myself, never strayed far from the mapped paths. But on the third night, while reviewing footage by the fire, I heard the first whistle, clear, high-pitched, not bird call, not wind, just one, like someone calling a dog. It came from beyond the tree line, maybe 100 feet into the dark. I froze, the fire crackling beside me, the hairs on my arms standing straight. I didn't answer, just turned on my headlamp and swept it across the woods. Nothing. No eyeshine, no movement. I waited, thinking maybe it had been some kind of echo. Then, 20 minutes later, another whistle. This one different, shorter, sharper. 2 bursts, evenly spaced. That's when I remembered the warning. 1 whistle, ignore. 2, run. But I didn't run. Not then. I told myself it was coincidence. Maybe a bobwhite quail. Maybe a kid camping illegally. I turned in for the night, zipped the tent shut, and left the headlamp on. The next morning, all my trail cams were gone. The metal brackets remained, snapped clean as if someone or something had ripped them off with one motion. No tracks, no drag marks, just the absence. I checked my tent for tampering. Everything else seemed untouched. But my memory card case was open. Cards still there, but jumbled, out of order. That detail got under my skin in a way nothing else had. Something or someone had come close enough to touch my equipment, rearranged it, and left no trace. I spent the day trying to shake it off, hiked upstream to set new markers and clear my head. But the deeper into the valley I walked, the more I noticed how quiet it had become. Even the creek seemed to hush itself, like the woods were holding something back. I stopped near an outcrop to adjust my gear and saw something carved into the bark of a tree nearby, 2 vertical lines, parallel, about shoulder height, fresh, no moss in the grooves, no sign of a blade or knife. It looked burned in. That night, the whistling came again, closer now, 1 long whistle, then silence, then 2 short. I didn't hesitate, grabbed my boots, flashlight, and knife, and slipped into the woods, crouching low and circling around the sound. I wanted to catch whoever it was, get a shot, prove it was just some kid messing with me. But the flashlight flickered once, then again, and died. The spare wouldn't turn on either. I turned back, found the path, followed the reflective tags I'd placed earlier, but somehow ended up back at my own tent. The fire was still going, but my gear had been moved. My camera now sat pointed directly at the tent. Lens uncovered. My lighter, which had been zipped inside my jacket, was now sitting on top of my sleeping bag. I checked the tent zippers. Still closed, still locked. And yet, something had been inside. I sat outside till dawn, knife in hand, staring into the dark. In the morning, I reviewed the camera. 1 photo, just 1 blurry. A figure, tall and narrow, with 2 long arms and something like antlers or branches twisting from its head. No eyes, no mouth. Just the suggestion of a face where none should be. The timestamp said 3:12 a.m., but I'd been sitting outside the whole time. I would have seen it. I should have seen it. By then, I was done pretending. I packed what I could and made my way back toward the car. Trail markers be damned. But the trail had shifted. I knew these woods, I'd mapped them myself, and now the turns were wrong. Trees I'd flagged were missing. The switchback near the ridge never came. I found myself looping, each path curving back into the last, and always, somewhere ahead or behind, the faint sound of a whistle. I stopped just once, to check my phone's compass app. It spun, then, slowly. It pointed due north toward a grove I'd never seen. I don't know why I followed it. Maybe I thought it was the way out. Maybe I thought I could reason with whatever had taken root in these trees. But when I stepped into the grove, every bird in the canopy took flight at once. The sound was deafening. And when the feathers settled, I was alone again, except for the mirror. Yes, a mirror tall, cracked, its frame swallowed by ivy, just standing there in the woods, as if it had grown from the ground. My own reflection looked back, pale and damp, eyes hollowed by something I didn't feel until then. I reached out, touched the glass. Cold, too cold. And then my reflection didn't move. It just stayed there, watching. I didn't scream. I couldn't. My throat tightened the moment I realized the reflection wasn't following me anymore. I pulled my hand away, and still it stood frozen, head tilted slightly, a fraction off from my own posture. I turned and walked, fast, not looking back, not listening for whistles. I just wanted to reach the car, to find the road, to return to the world where mirrors only show what's in front of them. But every direction felt wrong, like the forest had rearranged itself just beyond the reach of my steps. And the further I went, the more I realized the birds weren't just gone. They were never there to begin with. Eventually, I stumbled into what looked like a former logging path, barely more than a depression through ferns. I followed it, head low, limbs sore. My hands were trembling. At one point, I passed another photographer's marker flag faded orange, wrapped around a branch with the same twist tie brand I use. But it wasn't mine. The tag had initials I didn't recognize, LR, and a date, June 22nd, 07. That's when I noticed the pattern. The trees ahead were marked again this time with notches shaped like small crosses, carved clean into the bark. Too uniform, too frequent. Like someone had tried to leave a message and never made it out. The path led to a clearing. Flat, quiet. In the center stood an old stone well with a wooden crossbeam long since rotted through. The bucket hung from a chain, rusted to orange-brown dust. I stepped toward it, heart pounding, drawn without reason. When I looked inside, it wasn't water I saw, it was myself, staring back, but not the version I'd come to expect. This version smiled, and then whispered, without sound, "Stay." I reeled back and almost slipped into the edge. My boots kicked up wet soil, soaked, though the sky had been dry for days. That was when I heard the third whistle. 3 bursts, even, crisp. I hadn't been told what 3 meant. No one had. It was almost worse. That blank space in the warning. I didn't know whether to run or freeze. But my legs chose for me. I ran. Back through the clearing, back into the trees that now seemed to lean inward. The trunks were no longer still, they flexed and shifted, breathing in tandem, forming arches I had to duck beneath. The forest was changing again, becoming less like land and more like something else. Something shaped by sound and memory. I ran until my lungs burned, until night fell without warning. The sun vanished like it had never existed. I tried to check the time, but my watch screen was black. My phone, too, everything unpowered, unmoored. And then the whistling started again, not from ahead or behind, but inside my ears, a pressure that built and pulsed in time with my breath. It became impossible to tell what was memory and what was happening now. At one point, I fell, hit my head, lay there on the cold earth, and swore I saw figures moving between the trees, tall, silent, each carrying something that glowed faintly in their hands, not lanterns, mirrors. I woke to silence and early dawn light. My face was damp with dew, or sweat, or something else. I sat up, shivering, unsure how long I'd been out. The woods were still again, too still. I followed the slope down without thinking, and somehow, impossibly, I reached the parking lot. My car sat where I left it, untouched, clean, but the passenger door was unlocked. I hadn't touched it. Inside, my photos had been sorted neatly into a new folder on my laptop. The file was labeled Return. When I opened it, the screen went black for a moment. Then image after image began to flash by slowly, deliberately. Shots I never took. Me walking through trees. Me crouching by the well. Me sleeping, always framed like something had been watching. The last image lingered longer than the rest, the mirror in the woods. Still cracked, still vine-wrapped. And behind the glass, something no longer pretending to be me. I drove for hours that day, never looking back, never turning on the radio. When I got home, I smashed the laptop, burned the memory cards, and scrubbed the metadata off my work site. I haven't been on a trail since, not even city parks. Whistles still come sometimes at night, usually soft. From the backyard, always 2 short bursts. I never answer, not anymore. But lately, there's been something new. A third whistle, just one. And I don't know what that means. I took the job because I needed the quiet. Clearing trails in the Carolina backwoods isn't glamorous. But after my second DUI and a short stint in county, it was either this or stacking boxes in a warehouse. My name's Reggie Harlow. I'm 32. Not much to brag about. No family to speak of. The ranger station said Dead Elk Gap was overgrown. Barely walked since a rock slide in '98. They handed me a chainsaw, a pack, and a laminated topo map that looked like it hadn't been updated in years. Cut the path clean to marker 16. They said, if you see any strange markers, just log them. The first cross was about 2 miles in. It looked handmade. 2 weather-worn branches bound with twine, nailed to the trunk of a tulip poplar. At first, I figured it was a hunter's mark or some old religious thing. But it wasn't on the map, and it wasn't old enough to be forgotten. The wood had been stripped of bark recently. Clean grooves. Beneath it, carved directly into the bark, was a set of symbols, 3 angular shapes, like triangles turned in on themselves. No moss, no age. I snapped a photo, noted the coordinates, and kept moving. 2 hours later, I found another, then another, each nailed to a tree about 50 feet off trail, always just far enough to feel like I was being watched as I passed. The third one stopped me cold. The carving underneath it wasn't a symbol. It was a date, July 9th, 2007. My mother's birthday. She died in 07. Stroke, fast and quiet. I stood there longer than I meant to, trying to convince myself it was coincidence. But my palms had gone cold, and I couldn't shake the feeling that the forest had gone still just for me. By the 5th mile, the trail itself began to twist oddly, the trees pressing in with a heaviness that wasn't there before. I chalked it up to exhaustion, maybe dehydration. I took a break beneath a split rock outcropping, drank half my water, and checked my compass. It was pointing east when I knew I'd been walking south all morning. I tapped it, shook it, and watched the needle spin once, then stop pointing directly behind me. That's when I noticed it. A fresh cross, not nailed to a tree this time, but standing, jammed into the ground a few feet behind where I'd sat. Same twine, same bare wood, no carving visible, just upright, waiting. I didn't touch it, just packed my gear and moved fast, faster than before, forcing my way through bramble that hadn't been on the trail yesterday. And that's when the humming started. Low, directionless. It seemed to come from the earth itself, or maybe inside my skull. A dull, rhythmic hum that rose and fell like breath. I stopped to listen, and it stopped too, moved again, and it returned. That was when I realized it wasn't humming. It was a voice, deep, guttural, not speaking words, but holding sound like it meant something, like it was remembering me. I radioed the station dead air, tried twice, even swapped the battery pack. Nothing. I marked the time and location, like I'd been trained, and moved on. At mile marker 14, the trail bent sharply, steeper than I remembered from the topo. As I climbed, my boot hit something solid under a pile of leaves. I brushed them back to find a weathered box metal, rusted through in places. Padlocks snapped open. Inside was a ledger, handwritten. Dozens of names, dates, and short notations. Some names I didn't recognize. Some I did. One was mine. No note beside it. Just my name, Reggie Harlow, and a blank space where the date should be. That's when I turned around and saw the cross nailed to the tree behind me. The carving beneath this one wasn't a date or a symbol. It was a number. My driver's license number. I staggered back, mouth dry, heart pounding. This wasn't a joke. Wasn't old backwoods weirdness. Something had been waiting. I forced myself to finish the trail to marker 16. Half out of duty, half out of fear that stopping would only make it worse. The last half mile was dense with crosses, dozens. Some fresh, some rotted, some half burned. None of them marked on the map. At the final marker, I turned to head back and nearly dropped the saw. A new cross. I didn't touch the new cross, just stepped around it, careful not to brush the wood. The sap on it glistened like blood in the fading light. And the air had grown thick, still no birds, no rustling leaves, just that low hum rising again. Barely audible, but always there. The way back felt longer, and the markers I'd left earlier, orange ribbons tied at shoulder height, were gone. Every one. In their place were new carvings on the trees, long vertical gashes. Clean, deep, like they'd been made with something sharper than any tool I carried. I kept walking, head down, watching for anything that moved, and trying to forget the feeling that I wasn't the one choosing my path anymore. At mile 12, the sun dropped fast. Dusk didn't roll in, it collapsed. I pulled out my flashlight and scanned the path ahead. The beam caught a shape too still, too wide to be a branch. It was a figure standing between two trees, back to me, head slightly tilted. At first I thought it might be a ranger or another worker. But then the figure stepped forward without bending its knees, like it was being pulled on strings. I called out. No answer. The beam flickered, and when the light steadied, the figure was gone. But now there was a new cross nailed to the tree beside where it had stood. Wood still groaning from the pressure of the nails. I didn't stop after that. Didn't check the compass. Just kept moving, one foot after the other, until I recognized a landmark, the split rock where I'd stopped that morning. Only now. The cross wasn't behind it, it was on top. Balanced perfectly, tied with something that looked more like sinew than twine. The humming started again, louder now, vibrating through the soles of my boots. I turned to leave the clearing, but the trail had closed behind me. Brambles where there had been open path. Trees standing closer than they should. I hacked through with the saw, cut until my arms ached, until bark clung to my shirt and sap painted my sleeves. At last, I stumbled out onto open ground again. But the landscape had shifted. The trees around me were marked not just with crosses, but with names. Dozens of them. Some were carved directly into the bark, others painted in red, dripping down in long vertical trails. I scanned quickly, heart hammering, and found mine again. But this time, there was a date beside it, that day's date. I tried the radio once more. It clicked on this time. Static. Then a voice. My own voice. Whispering something I couldn't quite make out. I froze, listened. It repeated, it ends where it began. Over and over, softer each time, until the voice bled back into static and the battery light died. I ran. No path, no bearings, just downhill, trusting gravity and desperation. But every turn took me past another cross. I started to lose track of time. The woods felt folded in on themselves. I came to a clearing that wasn't marked on any map, with a circle of stones and a single wooden stake in the center. No cross, just the stake, bare, and a fresh coil of twine beside it. I knew what it meant. I knew what I was supposed to do. I didn't. Instead, I took a photo, backed away slowly, and forced myself onward. Something followed. I never saw it, only heard the breathing. Low and slow, always 2 steps behind. I burst through the trees near dawn, stumbled across the gravel access road, and collapsed near the trailhead. When the morning shift ranger found me, I must have looked feral, mud-caked, bleeding, trembling. I shoved the photo into his hand, told him to look, that something was out there. He studied the image for a long time before sliding it back to me. "There's nothing here. Reggie," he said, "just trees." I looked again. He was right. The photo was blank. No stake, no twine, just a clearing I didn't recognize. I didn't argue. I left the forest that day and never returned. I quit the job, sold my gear, and moved out west where the trees don't hum. But sometimes, I still hear that sound. Low, familiar, and in my dreams. I see the crosses again lined up in rows, each with a name, each one facing the wrong direction, waiting. And the worst part is, I still don't know if I was supposed to hang the cross for myself or for someone else. The first lantern appeared just after midnight. I'd been filming for 3 hours, already time-lapse footage of mist rolling through the pines, crickets humming beneath the canopy. My name's Eli, 34, documentary filmmaker by trade, mostly working freelance pieces on Appalachian folklore and dying rituals. Ashdown Trail, Virginia, was supposed to be the setting for a quiet short about forgotten footpaths. But instead, it became something else entirely. Local legend said people sometimes saw walkers at night, figures moving through the woods with oil lanterns, never breaking pace, never making a sound. I was skeptical. I always am. I'd heard stories like it a dozen times before, but the first lantern wasn't like the others I'd chased. It didn't flicker. It didn't sway with movement. It glowed with a steady, amber light that pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. And it moved too smooth, not like someone walking, but like something gliding just above the forest floor. I thought maybe it was a reflection or a firefly trick of the lens. I reset the tripod, adjusted focus, and waited. The light disappeared, then reappeared, 20 feet further up trail. I followed, slowly, carefully, gear in hand. The light stayed ahead, always just out of reach, weaving through trees with a kind of intelligence. I called out once, asking if someone needed help. No response. Just the lantern drifting further from the marked path. My phone's GPS was no help. The blue dot had frozen, showing me in a location I hadn't passed in over an hour. When I looked up again, the trail behind me was gone. Not overgrown, just missing. The trees closed in then, not visibly, but in feeling. The space around me shrank, like the woods were wrapping tighter. I turned back toward where I thought I'd come from and nearly tripped over a cairn, 5 stones stacked neatly, deliberately, at the center of the clearing. Not one I'd passed earlier. On top of the stack sat a rusted lantern, cold, unlit, identical to the one I'd been following. When I picked it up, the stones beneath shifted. Not fell shifted, as if adjusting. I backed away, Heart thudding, ears ringing with the sudden absence of sound. That's what struck me most. No insects, no leaves rustling, just the high, thin whine in my ears and the heat rising from my chest like panic on a slow boil. I turned again, walking fast now, trying not to run. But as I moved, I kept passing other cairns, each one with a cold lantern placed on top. Some broken, others pristine. None had been there before. Eventually, I found a narrow trail I didn't recognize. It looked like part of the old fire break system, long since abandoned. The air was heavier there, denser. My feet crunched over old leaves that hadn't moved in decades. I followed it downhill, hoping it might spit me out at the road. That's when I heard the footsteps. Soft, deliberate, matching my pace, but just out of sync. I stopped. So did they. I started again. So did they. I spun fast, camera raised, but the trail was empty. I started recording, narrating in a hushed voice just to keep myself grounded. I said the date, the time, Eli Corbin, Ashdown Trail, documenting possible visual anomalies. But my voice caught. Something stood ahead in the trail. It wasn't the light this time. It was a figure, tall, wrapped in something loose and pale, shoulders unnaturally broad. The lantern it held didn't swing. It hovered beside its hand like it had no weight. Its head turned slowly toward me. Though I couldn't see a face, just the hint of a hollow space beneath the hood. And though the thing never moved its lips, I heard the voice. "Leave it here." 3 words, clear in my mind, not in my ears. I blinked, and the figure was gone. In its place, on the ground, was my second camera, one I'd left at base camp, still packed in its case. I hadn't brought it up trail. But here it was, placed carefully atop another cairn that hadn't been there a second ago. This time, I didn't touch it. I turned, picked a direction, and walked. No trail, no bearings, just instinct and rising dread. The woods didn't fight me, not yet, but the light never left. It hovered always, a little to the left or right, just far enough to tempt, never close enough to reach. And behind me, the cairns were growing, taller, less like markers and more like altars. I began to understand something I hadn't wanted to believe. I wasn't filming a story about lanterns. I was the story. I don't remember stopping. One moment I was walking. The next, I was sitting by a dry creek bed. Legs cramping, camera cold in my hands. The lantern was gone. No cairns, no footsteps, just silence. Thick and pressing. I checked the footage on my main camera, desperate to ground myself in something real. The screen lit up, but the recordings had all been overwritten except one file. Untitled. It was 10 seconds long. I hit play, and the clip showed me standing perfectly still in the middle of a field of lanterns. Hundreds of them, glowing. I never remembered filming it. I shut the camera off and moved fast. My hands were shaking. I didn't know if it was night or morning light. It started to mean nothing out here. I passed another cairn, this one taller than me. On top sat something new, a strip of film. My brand, my reel, wound into a circle and anchored with a rock. When I bent to look closer, I saw the edge of the film strip was burned. The frames showed the same thing. Over and over, a still of my own face. Mid-scream, eyes wide with something I hadn't felt yet. Somewhere nearby, a lantern flickered. Then another. soon, a line of light stretched out between the trees, leading into the dark like a breadcrumb trail for the damned. My breath came shallow. I should have turned back, should have resisted. But I followed. I don't know why. Maybe I thought it would end differently if I gave in. Maybe I wanted to see what waited at the end of that procession. The path narrowed, dirt shifting underfoot, trees now curved like ribs overhead. I was inside something, not walking through it. Eventually, the trail ended at an old cabin, half collapsed, overgrown, but unmistakably human once. A single lantern burned on the porch, and beside it sat a reel-to-reel projector, ancient and humming. No screen, just a beam of light cast against the side of the cabin. I approached slowly. In the projected light, I saw myself again, only this time. I was watching me step into the cabin, not through the lens of a camera, but as if from behind my own eyes. It looped, over and over. Always the same motion, always the same moment. And every time I stepped through that doorway, the light inside grew dimmer. I backed away, but my foot hit another cairn, smaller, newer. Balanced atop it was my voice recorder. I hadn't even realized it was missing. I played it back. Static. Then my own voice whispered, "One must stay." Then again, louder, "One must stay." And then, a second voice deeper, older, full of rot. "Trade keeps the path." I dropped it, ran, no plan, no compass. Just the animal instinct of a person who knows they've been marked. But the woods fought me now. Every turn led back to that cabin. Every path, no matter how far I forced my body, opened again to that same porch, same projector, same cold beam of memory. The fourth time, the lantern had gone out. I collapsed, lungs ragged, and screamed until my throat bled. I begged, cursed, promised things I didn't understand. And then the air shifted cold, tight, like the forest exhaled. A light appeared again, just behind me. This one was different, smaller, blue, cold like a gas flame. It hovered beside my shoulder and didn't move when I did. I turned toward it, tears in my eyes, and whispered, "What do you want?" The light pulsed once, then drifted away. And I followed. It led me out. I don't know how. The trees thinned, the air warmed, dawn broke, sudden and sharp, and I stumbled onto the roadside just as a ranger truck came around the bend. They didn't believe me. Of course. Said I must have gotten turned around. That Ashdown Trail had been closed for 2 years following a mudslide. I asked about the cabin, the cairns, the lights. They said no such cabin exists in the park boundaries. They showed me satellite maps, nothing. When I got home, I checked my gear. My secondary camera was gone, my tripod scorched, and inside my gear bag, carefully wrapped in cloth, was one thing I couldn't explain: a lantern. Rusted, still faintly warm, and on the handle, scratched deep into the metal, were the words, "Your turn." I keep it now in the attic, never lit, never touched, but sometimes, around midnight, I hear footsteps just beyond the porch, and the faint sound of glass chiming together like someone walking with light. I came to Old Furnace Hill chasing songs. Specifically, Appalachian lullabies, half-remembered verses passed down like heirlooms, vanishing a little more each time they're sung. I was working on a thesis through the University of Georgia, collecting oral folklore from elder residents who still remembered the tunes their grandmothers sang in candlelight. My name's Liv Morrow, 28. Former choir teacher turned cultural archivist. I'd heard about Widow Mallory from a retired folklorist who claimed she remembered a version of The Mourner's Bell no one else had sung since the 1880s. So I drove out with my recorder, expecting creaky stories, a dusty house, maybe tea and polite regret. What I got instead was a voice that didn't belong to anyone living. The widow's cabin sat crooked on the southern slope, sagging into itself like a mouth that had forgotten how to close. Mallory greeted me in a housecoat, hair in a loose bun, eyes sharp as fresh frost. She looked at me too long, like she was trying to see if I'd brought something with me besides curiosity. Still, she let me in. Her voice was raw but strong, every syllable deliberate. I asked about the lullaby. She smiled, almost wistful. My mother sang it when she wanted the crying to stop. She said, even when there wasn't no baby to cry. She let me record her, just once. Her voice hummed low and strange, the melody simple but slanted, almost like it had been bent through time. The lyrics weren't right, not just old, but wrong in a way that scratched at something under the skin. Lay thee down, where bells won't ring, ash to ash, and bone to string. My recorder fuzzed halfway through, some kind of feedback I couldn't isolate. Mallory didn't notice. When she finished, she looked at me and said, "Don't hum that one at night, not here." I smiled, nodded, packed my gear. But that night in the cabin I'd rented 2 miles down the road, the bell started ringing. It was faint at first, one clear chime, like a brass bell tapped once by wind. I sat up in bed, thinking it was a dream. But the sound came again. Then a third time, each chime closer, sharper. I checked the windows. No one outside. I stepped onto the porch, breath fogging in the air, and looked toward the tree line. Nothing moved. But the ringing continued, softer now, like it had gone under the house. I didn't sleep. In the morning, I chalked it up to nerves, field stress, maybe too much coffee and the wrong kind of music before bed. But when I played the recording back on my laptop, the audio had changed. It wasn't just Mallory singing anymore. There was a second voice, layered beneath hers. Low, inhuman, drawn out like breath through wet leaves. It echoed after each line, not mimicking the words, but answering them. I hit pause. My fingers trembled. I rewound the file. It was still there. That night, the bells rang again. Not just once. They rang in rhythm. 3 chimes, then silence, then 2, then 4, then 1, like a pattern trying to teach itself to me. I recorded the sounds on my phone, but by morning, the file was corrupted. Only white noise. But when I listened carefully, very carefully, I could still make out something beneath the static. A whisper. My name. I returned to Mallory's cabin the next day. She wouldn't open the door. Said through the wood, "You hummed it, didn't you?" I told her I didn't. Swore it. But she didn't reply. Just said one last thing before her voice fell silent. You can't call what sleeps and expect it not to come listen. Then the lock turned, and she didn't answer again. The third night was worse. The bells didn't just ring, they screamed. Every chime rattled the windows, knocked books off shelves. But outside, the air was still. No wind, no sign of movement, just sound vibrating through the walls, from beneath the floorboards. I pulled up a corner of the rug and tapped the boards. Hollow. I pried one loose, and found dirt beneath, fresh and damp, like something had been buried recently. And then I saw the hair, dark, coarse, matted, tangled around a small brass bell, tarnished and cracked, wrapped in rotting cloth. I dropped it, staggered back, and felt the weight of the melody rise. Behind me, unheard but undeniable, as though the cabin itself was remembering. I tried to leave, but the door wouldn't open. My phone was dead. My laptop screen flickered. I sat in the center of the room, the bell on the floor still trembling, and waited for dawn. But dawn didn't come, not like it should have. The light that filtered through the cabin windows wasn't morning. It was thin and gray, like ash through gauze. I stepped outside to find the trees the same, but not. Their branches hung lower, dripping with something slick and dark. And the path that had led up to the road had vanished beneath a dense thicket that hadn't been there the night before. I called out, first for help, then for anyone, then just for the sound of my own voice. But the forest swallowed it, dull and heavy. The air smelled like old rain and burnt copper. I forced myself back into the cabin and packed. The bell still sat where I'd left it, wrapped in strands of blackened hair. I didn't touch it, just shoved everything else into my case and cracked the back door. But it opened onto more trees, wrong trees. The bark on them was pale, smooth like bone, and as I watched, they shifted slightly, as if turning to listen. I stepped back, slammed the door shut, and whispered the lullaby, just a fragment. Lay thee down. My own voice echoed unnaturally, and the bell rang again once, from the floor beneath my feet. That was when I realized the ringing wasn't random. It had rhythm, and that rhythm matched the syllables of the song. I played the recording one last time, low, heart-hammering. This time, I didn't just hear Mallory in the second voice. There was a third, now soft, younger. It sang behind the others, always just late enough to feel like it was catching up. I muted the recording, and for a moment the air shifted like something disappointed. I didn't know what it wanted. Attention, repetition, worship, but I knew now it had been waiting far longer than I had been listening. I opened the floorboards again, hands shaking. The cloth bundle with the bell and hair was still there. But underneath it was something else, a sheet of paper, brittle and yellowed, written in ink so faded it looked scorched. It held only one phrase, repeated in uneven lines, "The bell remembers who hums." Some letters trailed off, overwritten again and again, as if someone had tried to drown the words in themselves. I folded it carefully, tucked it into my journal, and made for the front door again. This time it opened. Outside, the trees were back to normal. The road was visible again. A hawk called from somewhere above, and I nearly wept from the sound of something living. But behind me, the cabin didn't quite sit right. It leaned a little more, and the windows seemed darker than before. I didn't linger. I drove into town, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, and headed straight to the folklorist who told me about Mallory in the first place. But when I mentioned the song, her face blanched. That one was never meant to be sung out loud. She said, "That's not a lullaby, it's a summoning." I told her everything. The bells, the voices, the cabin shifting. She listened, nodded once, and opened a drawer filled with old field notes and cassette tapes. One of them, labeled Furnace Hill, 1963, had the same melody recorded by a woman who'd gone missing 2 weeks after the interview. The note on the case just read, "Don't return." I asked if she still had the full lyrics. She shook her head. No one does. The song changes every time it's heard. That's the point. It grows. It feeds. I haven't gone back to the hills since. But the bells followed me. I hear them at night, through the vents, faint and distant like someone ringing them from beneath the floorboards. I don't record music anymore. I don't even listen to it unless I'm in public. The voice on the lullaby hasn't returned. Not exactly. But sometimes, in the still hours between 3 and 4, I hear my voice singing softly through the walls, singing words I haven't written yet. And I know, without question, that something else is humming along. The first cairn wasn't supposed to be there. I was up on the Pinnacle Falls Ridgeline, North Carolina, conducting a solo field study for my geology thesis, something to do with freeze-thaw cycles and slope stability. My name's Derek, 25, UNC grad student with more gear than good sense, and a tendency to bushwhack off-path when I see something interesting. I'd camped near a rockfall zone that hadn't moved in years. And the first morning I woke to find 5 smooth stones stacked neatly beside my tent. I didn't hear anyone during the night. No prints in the soil. Nothing disturbed. Just that stack, sitting perfectly balanced, in a place I knew had been clear before. I took a photo, logged it, and kept moving upslope. Thought maybe a park crew had passed through, or another hiker was playing around. But by day 3, I'd seen 4 more cairns, always in places I'd just passed an hour or 2 earlier. Always different heights. Some were 3 stones high, some 6. None of them crumbled or tipped, even an unslanted rock. That alone was strange. The wind up here cut sharp. And even my tent had to be double-staked to hold. But these cairns didn't budge. They looked placed, not just balanced. I started testing them, nudged one with my boot, and watched the top stone tumble. That night, I dreamed of someone whispering from outside the tent. I couldn't hear the words, just the tone, urgent and rhythmic, like a chant. When I woke, another cairn had appeared, this time inside the vestibule of my tent, right beside my pack, smaller than the others, 2 stones only. But on the flat face of the top rock was a red handprint. I didn't touch it, just packed my gear and relocated half a mile away, closer to the exposed ridge. I didn't sleep that night, too busy scanning the dark, listening for breath or movement or anything human. But the air stayed still, too still. No wind, no insects, like the land had paused itself. The next morning, I noticed my compass was acting strange, spinning for a moment, then settling in the wrong direction. I double-checked with GPS. The reading was off by over 3 miles. No way. The cairns kept appearing. Sometimes I'd look up from a rock sample and see one on the ledge above me, where nothing had been seconds ago. Once, I turned a corner and nearly ran into one at chest height, perfectly centered in the narrow path like a warning. I thought about leaving then, but the research was important, and I was stubborn. I told myself it was psychological, some loop in my mind, projecting symbols where there were none. Until I found the journal. It was tucked beneath the lip of a broken cairn, held down by a flat slab, weathered leather cover, pages brittle but legible. The entries were dated sporadically over a span of 20 years, all signed with different initials, each one describing the same thing, the cairns, their appearance, The misread compasses, the dreams. One entry caught my eye. It was dated July 2nd, 1981. My birthday. The writer described waking to find stones in a circle around their sleeping bag, all of them inscribed with strange markings, symbols like those used in burial rites. I flipped to the last page. Blank except for a single line scrawled in shaky ink. Do not follow your own tracks. That night, the fog came early, thick and low, curling around my ankles before the sun had fully set. I stayed inside the tent, recording notes by headlamp. But when I glanced toward the flap, I saw movement. A silhouette tall, narrow standing just beyond the canvas. Not moving, not speaking. I held my breath. The figure bent slowly and placed something against the tent, then walked away. When I dared open the flap, I found a stone, flat, black-veined, my initials carved into one side. I left the ridge at dawn, hiking fast, barely stopping to rest. The trail I'd marked was gone. Every blaze I'd painted had vanished or shifted. I tried to use my GPS, but the map began redrawing itself in real time, showing paths I hadn't taken, loops that shouldn't exist. And at every major turn, a cairn, higher now, more jagged, like someone was stacking memories, not rocks. And every time I passed one, I felt watched. By the time I found the road, my pack was lighter. I didn't remember unloading anything. But my tools were missing. My camera, my journal, all gone. In their place, inside the side pocket, was a stone I didn't recognize. Just one. But carved into it was something I'll never forget: the outline of a human foot. Reversed. Toes pointing backward. I dropped it and didn't look back. I didn't go back to Pinnacle Falls, not even to collect the rest of my gear. I filed a report with the university citing unstable terrain, kept the language clinical, avoided anything that might raise questions I couldn't answer. But the cairns followed me. Not literally, not at first, just images, dreams. I'd be walking across campus and see a small stack of books left on a bench, 3 volumes, balanced just so, and feel a cold pulse in my chest. I stopped sleeping well, stopped writing. Any attempt to focus brought the same image back to my mind, the black-veined stone with my initials carved deep enough to hurt. A week later, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a padded envelope. And within that, a single photograph, glossy, color, dated 2 days earlier. It showed a new cairn standing at the edge of the ridge where I'd camped. But this one was different. Taller, 12 stones high, leaning but impossibly stable. At the very top sat something small and dark. When I zoomed in, I saw it was my missing compass. The photo had been taken from a height I never reached, as if someone or something had been standing above me. I called the forestry office to ask if anyone had been working that section of the trail. The woman on the line paused a long time, then said the area had been closed for over a year. Landslide risk, no field teams up there. She told me, no one goes near Pinnacle now. I asked about the cairns. She got quiet, said something odd: the stones don't mark where you've been. They mark where you're meant to return. That night, I woke up at exactly 3:13 a.m. My feet were cold, though the apartment was warm. When I turned on the lamp, I saw a fine line of grit on the floor like dust from the trail. And in the middle of the room, near the base of my desk, sat a single stone, not stacked, just placed. I recognized it instantly, the same red handprint. faint but present, pressed onto its surface. I threw it out the window, heard it hit the sidewalk 3 floors below. But in the morning, it was back, sitting in the same spot. The journal I'd taken from the ridge began showing new pages. I hadn't touched it, hadn't opened it since the day I got back. But now, when I flipped through, I found fresh entries, different handwriting. Some were simple, just coordinates. Others described things I hadn't experienced, figures with stone faces, mouths full of gravel, voices that echoed backward. One entry chilled me to the core. "You must carry the last cairn, or the trail begins again." I didn't know what that meant until I woke up in my car one morning. No idea how I got there. The gas tank was empty. My boots were muddy, and the seat beside me held a familiar shape wrapped in a canvas sack. I opened it slowly. Inside was the same stone I'd seen in the dream, the one with the reversed footprint. Only now, the print glowed faintly, like heat lingering after a fire. I drove straight to the nearest hiking trail and hurled it into the deepest gorge I could find. But I knew it wasn't over. The cairns started appearing in places they shouldn't, in photos I hadn't taken, in friends' backgrounds during video calls. One showed up outside my building small, just 3 stones, but it hadn't been there the night before. A neighbor swore they saw someone crouching by my door around midnight. But the cameras showed nothing, just static. And for one frame, a blur, a shape too tall and too narrow, hunched as if waiting. I tried returning the journal to the university archive, but the librarian claimed no record of my checkout existed. They had no file on my project, no thesis on record. When I checked the website, my name had vanished from the grad student roster. It was like I'd never been there. But I am. I carry proof scratches across my wrist from where the stones once pressed too tightly as I slept. A dream that loops every night, the cairns building higher and higher, and something climbing them slowly, always climbing. I don't know what happens when the last cairn is placed, but I know it's close. I see it in the corners of photos, in the way shadows stretch across parking lots where they shouldn't. I hear the stones shift, gently, just before waking. I've started stacking them myself now, as if preparing, as if trying to stay ahead. And when the final one appears, I won't run, because some trails don't lead you home. Some just remember where you're supposed to end. After Nathan died, I stopped keeping track of days. Grief has a way of stretching time, pulling hours into slow, syrupy messes where mornings and nights blur together. I was 36, and Hollow Pine was the only place that had ever quieted my head. My name's Nora, and I'd spent every childhood summer in that old one-room cabin tucked deep in the Tennessee woods, 2 miles from any road worth naming. After the funeral, I packed what I could into the truck and drove there with no clear plan. Just away. I told myself it was for healing, maybe to write. But really, I wanted to be somewhere that hadn't known him. Somewhere the air didn't hold his laugh. The first night back, the silence felt kind. The familiar creaks of the rafters, the smell of cedar rot in the corners. I lit a fire and read until my eyes blurred. But just before sleep, I caught the scent of something strange, burnt wood and cold iron. Not from my fire, from somewhere else. I checked the flue. Nothing. The coals barely glowed. I chalked it up to memory. Everything smelled like smoke after a while. But the next morning, Something odd happened. My watch blinked 2:13 a.m. Even though the sun was up, I reset it. Thought maybe the battery was going. Then I noticed my phone, same thing. The time had frozen during the night, sometime between dreams. I let it go, spent the day walking the old paths, photographing fallen trees and moss patterns on stumps. But when I returned that night, the clock on the stove blinked the same 2:13, not 2:12, not 2:14, always 2:13. I told myself it was grief again, that I'd broken my internal clock along with everything else. But the days began to warp. Light didn't fall the same. I'd start dinner and minutes later, it would be pitch dark outside. My journal entries looped. I'd write something, only to find a nearly identical paragraph already scrawled a few pages back in my own handwriting. Same pen, same spacing, but dated a week before I'd arrived. I started to question my memory. Had I been here longer than I thought? Had I ever left? On the fourth night, the smell returned stronger. I woke with a start, heart pounding, and realized the fire had gone out completely. Yet the cabin was warm, too warm, like something had just left. My breath didn't fog in the air, but I still felt cold. That's when I saw the journal's ones I hadn't brought. 4 of them, all stacked neatly on the table beside my own. The covers were cracked leather, brittle and faded, but inside each was my name, my handwriting, dozens of entries, all different, all starting the same way. If you're reading this, you haven't left yet. My first thought was someone was playing a cruel joke, that the grief had gotten so bad I'd hallucinated the books into existence. But they were real, heavy, pages stained from age or damp or worse. I scanned one cover to cover, and the last page ended with the line, "You must not sleep through 2:13. I checked the clock. 2:12. My skin went cold. I didn't sleep that night. Sat upright on the cabin cot, flashlight in hand, heart knocking against my ribs like it was trying to get out. At exactly 2:13, everything changed. The fire flared not back to life, but sideways, like wind had sucked the flames into the stone. The walls creaked loud, sharp, and something clanged underneath the floorboards. I held still, breath caught, then silence, for a long time, until I heard the doorknob turn. It didn't open, just turned, once to the right, once to the left, then back. The next morning, I found the door locked from the inside, the key still on the table where I'd left it. I stepped outside, boots crunching frost I hadn't noticed the day before. The sun was wrong higher than it should have been, casting shadows that pointed toward it instead of away. I walked to the creek and saw the reflection of the cabin in the water, except it wasn't my cabin. Not exactly. The roof was caved in, the door was gone. Smoke rose from a chimney I knew hadn't worked in decades. When I blinked, it was gone. Just my reflection again. But I backed away slow, stomach twisting like I'd swallowed something made of nails. I tried to leave that day, packed fast, got in the truck. But when I hit the main gravel road, it looped. The trees repeated, same scarred oak, same patch of fern. I drove in a circle for 2 hours before realizing I was almost out of gas. So I returned, furious, afraid, desperate to burn something that might free me. I threw the journals into the fire that night. But they didn't burn. The journals hissed in the flames, but they didn't blacken. The fire licked at their edges like it was curious, not hungry. I watched them for nearly an hour before reaching in with the poker and pulling one free unmarked, unburned, and ice cold. My hands shook as I flipped to a random page. The entry was dated 3 days ahead, and it described exactly what I'd just done. Tried to burn the journals, failed, stared into the fire with shaking hands. The next line stopped me cold. Tomorrow, she digs. I hadn't thought about digging until that moment. The next morning, I found the old shovel. It had belonged to my grandfather, rusted and warped, leaning behind the cabin where I remembered it from summers past. I wasn't sure what I was looking for, but the journal had circled a spot on a crude hand-drawn map just past the creek, beneath a leaning birch. I walked out there in the fog, found the tree, and started to dig. The soil gave easy, as if it remembered being disturbed. About 3 feet down, I hit something hollow. It was a box, wood and iron, small enough to carry but heavy with time. The lid creaked when I opened it, revealing a single object inside a watch, my watch. The same make and model, down to the crack on the face, but older, worn smooth. I hadn't lost mine. It was still in my coat pocket. But when I pulled it out, I froze. It now showed a different time, 2:13, locked, unchanging, just like the one in the box. I took both watches back to the cabin and sat staring at them until the sun dipped. As the light died, I began to hear movement outside again. Not footsteps this time, more like dragging, like something being pulled along the leaves, slow and heavy. I locked the door, turned off the lights, sat with my back against the wall and waited. At 2:13, the fire roared again. Not sideways this time, but straight up, like something pushing through. I could see shapes inside the flames. Faces, maybe. Eyes that knew mine. And from under the floorboards, the clanging returned, this time louder, rhythmic, like a bell without a tongue, being struck from inside the earth. I ran outside and didn't stop until I reached the tree line. The stars above were wrong clusters in places I didn't know. The moon too low and tinged with red. I turned back to look at the cabin, and what I saw made my knees buckle. There were 2 of them, identical cabins, side by side. Doors open, fires burning inside. One was mine, the other its mirror. And standing between them was a figure. I couldn't see its face, just the outline, draped in something like shadow, holding a journal in one hand and a shovel in the other. It didn't move, just tilted its head, like it was listening. Then it took one step backward into the false cabin and vanished. I waited until morning, somehow. The trees straightened, the sun rose normal, the roads returned. I left Hollow Pine that day, didn't stop driving until I saw buildings again. Back in the city, I boxed the journals, hid them in the attic, told myself it was just trauma, my mind playing tricks. But then the mail came. No return address, just a package containing a new journal, blank except for the first page, which read, "If you're reading this, you made the wrong choice." Since then, time slips, clocks reset. I find pages torn from books I haven't read yet. And every year, on the anniversary of Nathan's death, I wake at 2:13 a.m., staring at a cabin that isn't there, hearing the sound of bells beneath the floor. I don't know if I ever left. I don't know if I was meant to. But some part of me stayed in that loop, digging, writing, watching the fire.